Hey NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIFBALL podcast powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAI fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here, back with another edition of the NAIFBALL podcast powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch, your experts in the uniform apparel and merch industry since 1974. You heard the ad. I've got Matt Schwartzler back with me, and we have got the Mid-States Mideast today, and we have some numbers here for you at the end of the podcast that not even Matt has seen on actually seen some actually did more math. Can you believe it? More math. But
I'm glad you're doing it because I would not want to do it.
You know, the sacrifices that we have to make.
Yeah.
First up on our tour day Mid-States, that's going to be the MADONNA Crusaders. Unfortunately, an offer on both accounts last year with an offense that was admittedly kind of mid. I think at this point is a compliment.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Obviously, you see they're 58th in total offense, which, all things considered, you don't get a win on the board. That's not too bad, not too shabby. That defense, though, was looking pretty rough at 6.77 yards per play, best for 91st in the country out of 98. That's it's not too great.
It's not too great.
Nobody,
yeah,
nobody for all conference really coming back from. But the good news about that is that they bring back pretty much everybody. So there's positives to that.
I literally could not find a senior like that had a stat on the entire squad. I mean, honestly, MADONNA only began like 2 or 3 years ago. So, you know, and they chose to do it through the high school ranks, not bringing in a lot of JUCO guys. And so 2 or 3 years in, this is about what you'd expect. You just got to get that defense better because there's a lot of folks that can eat you up in this league offensively, and you got to make sure that you've got that down pat.
Totally. And I think too there's something to be said. Obviously, going the traditional high school route as a new program is really tough. We've seen programs like Mount Marty come into the fray, and they bring in a lot of transfer portal guys, and they're able to be pretty competitive after a year or two. This is a much more natural way of building it, obviously, but it takes a lot longer. So I think they're on the right path. It's hard to tell just because you go over, it's hard to take positives from that, but bring everybody back. That group is going to be kind of your first, getting close to your first group that's going to get fully through the program. Something to take note of for sure for this team for next season.
And not only are you a new team and you're going all freshmen, but you get stuck in one of the toughest divisions in the entirety of the NAIA, and you lose your head coach before you play your first game. You're kind of you're kind of up creek a little bit. Let's just run through some of the folks they got coming back from Josh DePauli at quarterback, Nick Allgood at running back, Novell Chestnut at wide receiver. On the defensive side, defensive lineman Colt Oyervidez there. Sorry, I can't see that far, apparently. Jaquel Davis at linebacker, and Cortland Cochran at DB, who snagged 6 picks last year. That'll do, honestly. and that's a great piece to have there, and to build that defense around. Again, it's not like, you're coming in and you picked up a bunch of cast-offs from somewheres else that just didn't pan off, that were already juniors and seniors. You get to build it your way.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's enough pieces coming back to work with there. I say it pretty much every time we talk about one of these bottom teams, but a lot of them bring back most of their guys. So something to be said for sticking around and building a culture.
Now, the next team up is no stranger to doing that. They did so only a year or two before MADONNA threw their hat in the ring, and that's going to be Lawrence Tech, the Blue Devils, again with one of the sharpest logos, honestly, in the NAIA. Love the simple word mark there, or letter mark there for the Blue Devils. 3-7, 2-5. Everyone was saying last year, watch out for Lawrence Tech. They're still kind of saying it, because they play, at a higher level than the metrics might say. You're only second from the bottom, and we're going to go negative back here in a minute on the yards per play kind of net there. But Lawrence Tech finds their way into positive territory. They're just not able to find that kind of 5-5 area.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a lot of good things about this team last year. Obviously, another newer program. CJ Davidson was a big part of what they did last year at running back with almost 600 yards rushing. He's coming back. You have Jaden Rembert also returning. Dante Banton also coming back. That's big. But on the offensive side of the ball, something of worry for this team is you have Tyler Kolka, obviously almost 3,000 yards passing, 24 touchdowns. He's leaving. It's a big piece of your offense right there that you have to replace.
Yeah, Kendall Williams at that wide receiver and returner spot gets first team for wide receiver, second team for returner. 802 yards receiving with 11 touchdowns, and you've got a tight end. That's got to be one of the top receiving tight ends in the league with 436 yards just in terms of that output. Now Lawrence Tech is a very aired out team, so you've got to find a quarterback who is going to be able to do what Kolka did. I mean, that's a 62% completion percentage for Kolka. That is better than a lot of starting quarterbacks in this league, especially when you're a team where the opposition knows that you're going to want to air it out.
Totally. Yeah, there's something to be said for scheming for exactly what you're expecting, but they still had production. Obviously, you get a quarterback like Kolka in there, being able to air it out the way they did, and it's very much in your face, like, yeah, this is what we are, this is what we're going to do, and you need to try to stop us. And obviously, a lot of teams were able to best them, but I think there's a lot of positives to having that mentality. And if you get the right guys being able to plug in at those spots, for the guys that are leaving, very, very potent offensive system that could explode at any moment.
And the fact is that you're in a metro area. You're in Detroit, basically. So you've got lots of high schools around you that you can pull talent from. Let's take a look at their 2023 outlook. They return about half of their offense. All the running backs return, but they're basically their next man up at quarterback, Caleb Garner, took like less than 1% or completed less than 1% of their passes, for less than 1% of their passing yards. So I call him coming back, but he's going to have big shoes to fill. You do return a majority of your defense, including linebacker Darian Murray and defensive back Jordan Morris there, but this is a team where you may see a step back offensively. We'll see what they do on defense.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's enough returning for them to be excited for next season. This is a team that I think was surprisingly competitive despite what their record might show. SP Plus does a bit better of a job displaying that at 69th and SP Plus. Nice on that one. But yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to with this Lawrence Tech team.
The Mideast has some major oddities in terms of the SP Plus, where teams either got really lucky or got really terribly unlucky. And we'll call those out as we go. But next one up is Taylor with a second-year head coach, Aaron Mingo, coming out of that Dort system in the GPAC. There's a lot of intermingling. We'll get into it in a bit, where there's a lot of first and second year head coaches, but man, they are very familiar with the MSFA. And so what you're going to look for from Taylor is a very tough smash mouth team that likes to RPO and option the crap out of you and really frustrate defenses into making there be no good option.
100%. And you bring in a guy from Dort to run that kind of team, that's definitely the guy you want stepping up to the plate for that type of offense, that type of team. Overall, very solid unit. Obviously, offensive side of the ball was more their strength at 41st at 4.62 yards per play. Defense, a little bit lacking, but still was able to get the job done in a lot of games for them. Special teams. I feel like we haven't talked a lot about special teams specifically, but like those two all-conference guys leaving in Zane Schultz and Sean Callahan, kicker and long snapper.
Yeah, that's going to be two big pieces on your special teams unit to replace there. I mean, you got to have a good kicker. You got to get the ball to the kicker, and they are excited about what they've got coming back, especially in that second season. We talk about it all the time that, you know, the second season is such a big growth period for most of your coaches, and you bring back a majority of your offense and defense. You're getting your guys in place, and man, Taylor's going to be a tough game for every team up and down this division.
Including FCS Butler. They play Butler like every year, don't they?
A lot of teams play Butler several times. Trying to look at, see if I can find that. See if we've got a schedule up for Taylor. They did play at Butler, lost 45-10 last year. I don't think they've got a 2023 one up so far, but I do love playing the FCS Pioneer teams. It definitely gives you a good spot to look. So as we move on, I'm going to point out kind of my first oddity here. And this is going to be a St. Francis team that the record might not show it at 4-6 and 2-5. They weren't a bad team last year. That record does not reflect. That's not reflective of a team with the 38th ranked offense and the 47th ranked defense. And apparently Coach Donnelly, who is obviously and absolutely and always will be the GOAT in the NAIA, got a stellar recruiting class. Watch out for St. Francis next year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the metrics really favor this team. They were really solid on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. You have Cameron Peterson coming back, who was, a few hundred yards shy of reaching 1,000. O-line Jared Almeida, a big part of that offensive unit that was able to move the ball well. And on the defensive side, they have AJ Moore and Nate Talhelm coming back, which was your leader on the defensive line and linebacking core.
110 tackles there for Talhelm. You are going to have to. The one thing that's a little iffy is you're going to have to replace your quarterback. Garrett Yoon did start some games last year for them and did sometimes leave a little bit to be desired. So we'll have to see how now he was young doing it. So
Hmm.
let's see what a season under his belt's gonna be able to do for you. All your running backs return and most of your wide receivers return, and then you get a minority of your defense, a few of your D linemen return, half of your linebackers and defensive backs. But this might be a really young team who we look back at the end of the season and we see some really well played games where they beat folks that they shouldn't. We might also see some games where the freshmen don't do it and they underplay and they lose to a team that they shouldn't. We'll have to see. I mean, Donnelly has been there with every team imaginable, honestly.
Yeah. That's the woes of a young team, but obviously the good part about that is that your ceiling is so high. You don't really know where your limit is at yet. And I think for a St. Francis team that was few results away from having a winning record, obviously the metrics favor them. I don't think it'll take that much to turn this ship around for them.
Definitely is a ship where there's a lot of investment going on in that team, and the folks of Fort Wayne are used to and expect a winning team out of their Cougars. We'll be right back after this message from our friends at AdCraft.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today and let's bring your merch to life.
And they are certainly the best at doing that and bringing your ideas to life. Getting John Cooper set up over in Franklin County with some incredible merch. Next up is a team that I don't know if sometimes they forget that there are two sides to a football game, but it is one of the most incredible defenses year in, year out in any league in the country, and that's going to be the Siena Heights Saints. Again, we get this almost comical disparity with the 92nd ranked offense and the 10th ranked defense here. Gives them a 30th, and look, I mean, defense wins championships and keeps you in games. Siena Heights, though, has to find a way to keep moving forward with that offense if they want to get into the playoffs and knock off, the teams at the top of the mid-states.
Totally. I think with who they have coming back, though, there's enough pieces there on the offensive side of the ball to work with. Eric Williams, mostly of note, 400 plus yards, few touchdowns for him. He is coming back, but also that defense is still just as good as ever. Obviously, Antonio Simley and Joe Wharton, both coming back, both first team all conference defensive line. There's good reason to think that that roster is intact enough, but they do have a lot of pieces leaving as well.
Yeah, it's going to be the real toughie to lose is Conference Player of the Year Cole Merlin there with 114 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. That's the heart and soul of that Saints defense, and you're just going to have to find someone to step up in his place as about half of your D-line and linebackers, your front seven, about half of that returns. Most of your DBs do return, but, this is a Saints defense that, every year they're going to be good. One thing I'll note there is quarterbacks Ryan Miner and Hayden Lehman. Usually we only talk about one quarterback coming back, but I think they were within about 10 yards of each other production-wise, so it'll be really interesting to see what they do coming into 2023, if they're going to look to stay with the hot hand and ride that, or whether they're going to try to find one guy.
I think with how the offense looked last year, they would like to get a set starter in there. just for the sake of consistency. But if you can make 2 quarterbacks work, like, why not? But obviously there's enough to improve that they probably should look to start one. But I know I'm sitting in my chair here telling coaches how to coach, so I only have so much input on that, right? But I still think this is a very solid SIENA unit that can do a lot of damage.
Honestly, I'm with you on that. Anytime you can solidify a starter and have your guys used to only one guy in the pocket and know how he throws the ball and not have to think, and they can just play instead, oh man, that's a good spot to be. If you're a running back, if you're a wide receiver, if you're an offensive lineman, you know what that one guy wants to do. Moving on to a team where, we called it in a bad way last year and said that they would not be as good as they had in seasons past, and unfortunately for them, our prediction came true. That's going to be the Concordia Cardinals, who now you see a team that really, it looks like they got unlucky. What I'm going to tell you is this is a tale of 2 seasons for the Concordia Cardinals after starting 2-5. They go on a 3-game winning streak to close out their 2023 season, and they're ready to go for next season with 4 out of their 5 offensive linemen returning. That's how you want to do it right there. Your big one to have to deal with here is going to be at the end of September. They play at Tom Adams Field in Detroit, Michigan against Wayne State. That concludes a really, really tough September where you've got to play. You start off with Taylor, which you know you're going to get beat up. You travel to Bourbonnais, Illinois to play Olivet Nazarene. You come home to play Judson, and then you travel away to play Wayne State. That is, there is no rest for the weary here for Concordia as you get Marian and Siena Heights in October, and you finish off in November with St. Francis and Indiana Wesleyan. There's a reason why we call this the Gauntlet. But they've got to start fast. Unlike last year, where they started off 1-3 with 1 win against St. Ambrose, losing to Stetson, Roosevelt, and Indiana Wesleyan before finishing their season with wins against Lawrence Tech, Madonna, and St. Francis. You got to feel good about that in a very balanced team.
Yeah, I think so. And they just have so many key pieces coming back. I think that's the big part. We'll talk about it when we make our picks, but honestly, out of the top teams in the conference, even compared to the top 2 from last year, Concordia's roster is in really good shape. You obviously have first team all-conference running back Brandon Stewart coming back for them. First team all-conference wide receiver and returner Seeger DeGainer. Obviously 2 staples of your O-line and Gabe and Will Dowling coming back. And a first team all-conference punter linebacker hybrid Casey Ronch.
I absolutely love that. This is their second punter in a row who's also been an all-conference linebacker. Look, you talk to the folks over there. You talk to Coach Schumacher, and he has looked me dead in the face and said, "Hey, I like it when our punter makes tackles. He's not a liability out there on punt return.
Mm-hmm.
I get one of my best players doing that." And honestly, for the last couple years, Casey has been an over 40-yard average punter, a little bit of a dip here for him. But, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And, man, you got a lot coming back. You got all your quarterbacks back. You got all your running backs back. And you got a majority of your wide receivers back on offense. This was a team that was 32nd in offensive SP plus last year, and the 33rd ranked team made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. You're certainly in a good spot across the board, and not to mention that your defense is also 28th, solid numbers across the board, very well-rounded. You return enough guys on both sides of the ball to where these guys are running it back. They're getting comfortable, obviously. They're familiar with what's going on. I'm going to save my full remarks on this team for the very end when we make our picks, but I am very big on this team.
Absolutely. And as we continue climbing, we've got the team which has possibly skyrocketed the fastest, probably a tie between they and Kaiser in terms of how much they've turned it up and on so quickly, is Indiana Wesleyan. One of the nicest facilities in the nation, beautiful field, contract with ESPN to do their games, their home games, all on Watch ESPN. You've got a locker room that looks Division I FBS level. We say it every year. Indiana Wesleyan has the investment to have a really good team. Last year, they had the team to match the investment.
100%. I mean, you look at this, they're the best. They were the best defense in metrics last year, and even on the eye test, for crying out loud. Like, this defense was absolutely disgusting. And their offense at 34th overall in metrics was also not something to scoff at. They got it done. Obviously, quarterback Xander Stokes, who's a first-team all-conference guy, kind of led the charge for them. He's returning. You have few old linemen coming back in Lucas Doyle and Will Angel. You have running back Darian Williams coming back, who was almost 1,200 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns. You also have a first-team all-conference guy at every level of the defense, and defensive lineman Isaac Abeo, linebacker Clayton Mosher, and defensive back Neil Campbell, and also a long snapper to boot. We love our long snappers.
Now, here's kind of the question here is, will new head coach Andrew Rohde be able to step in where the prior staff left off? Obviously, if you don't know, the prior head coach now has a position coach gig at, I believe it was Iowa State, which, look, you ask every coach in the NAIA if a Power 5 job, especially a position coach, on-field coach job, comes open, are they leaving? I would guarantee you that about 99.9% of them are saying, yes, where do I sign? It's not that they don't love their teams. That's life-changing money right there, and I don't blame the Indiana Wesleyan guys at all there. Now, Andrew Rohde has a we alluded to it earlier. This is the guy with an intense history. You were the offensive coordinator at Morningside. You coach some guy named Joe Dolanchek over there.
Just some guy.
Just some Joe over there, literally. Before that, he was at Concordia. A little bit of familiarity with the Gauntlet and what it's got in it. And then before that, at Dort, he coached with Coach Aaron Mingo. A little bit of a GPAC MSFA ping pong match here for Andrew Rohde.
Crossover episode.
It definitely is. But I mean, you talk about coaches that know each other. Coaching with Aaron Taylor, coaching with Josh Schumacher. This might have been the perfect fit for Indiana Wesleyan.
Obviously, being on the receiving end of multiple losses to that Morningside squad, they're really good on offense, and obviously they had really good guys on their team, but there's something to be said for the people calling the shots, doing the X's and O's work behind the scenes, and I think you're right, Corey. Like, this is just a really good fit for an already super talented Iowa Wesleyan.
Rip.
Indiana Wesleyan. Almost went 0 for 3 there. RIP Iowa Wesleyan. Wow, that's
I'll save you here. Coach Rohde has displayed a knack for being able to mold his offense into what he wants it to be. Typically, what he likes to run is an offense where the quarterback is used as a runner. You're not gonna do that with the arm talent of Joe Dolanchek. You're just not. I mean, I'm sorry. It's not that he's not fast. He's just, look, you don't run Peyton Manning. You let him throw the ball.
It's way more efficient.
It's way more efficient that way. And so whatever he's walking into and whatever he's got with the transfers that he's got coming in and with what he's got coming back, you feel confident that he's going to be able to adapt his system to what he's got on hand. Now, here's what you're losing, and it's also a whale of a list. Jacquez Carter, who caught 915 yards and 11 touchdowns. Markel Stevens-Peppers, good for another 650 and 4. Charlie Hill, 102 and 4 scores. 2 all-conference offensive linemen. D-lineman Gardy Paul, 2 first-team all-conference defensive backs in Justin Johnson and Donovan Shelton. Johnson also a second-team returner there, so you're losing that aspect. 15 picks between Shelton and Johnson. And, your leading tackler, Devin Bacchus, with 94 tackles and 4 forced fumbles, which is, that's absurd. Man got his hands in there.
Game wrecker. And not to mention, you also lose 2 of your key pieces in the secondary and a returner in Justin Johnson and Donovan Shelton. This team is losing a lot, and it's going to be a lot for Road to deal with in year one. Obviously, coming from Morningside, maybe you bring some guys with him, which if that's the case, like, you're going to be able to fill a lot of spots that way because that's a very talented roster that you're pulling from. But that defense is, I don't think they will be the best metric defense just with what you're losing going into next year. They will still be very good. There's still a lot of talent on this roster. They will be able to win a lot of football games. They're going to deal with some growing pains at some point in the season, though. I think that's very apparent to how bad those growing pains are. I have no idea. I can't tell. Obviously, it's hard with such a talented team and roster to be able to gauge that because they could just pull guys out of the portal and reload like nothing ever happened, or it could completely fall apart. Like, there's a very wide range of things that could happen here.
And they don't get an easy road. The schedule does not do them any favors. Their out-of-conference game is, albeit at home, is Valparaiso, who, honestly, last year they lost to by 3 points at Valparaiso. That'll be an interesting measuring stick game for them, but the very next week you have to travel up to Chicago and play at Mike Feminis's St. Xavier. And then a week later after that, your other crossover game, you play at home against Roosevelt. So the schedule does you absolutely zero favors.
100%. I feel like that's a trend with a lot of these teams. September is just a brutal month.
September's a brutal month. October and November are always the absolute most brutal, especially for the top teams. For some sadomasochistic reason, they like it that way. I ask them, why do you do this to yourself? And they go, well, we like it that way. Okay. All right. October 28th. If
you want to be the best, you have to beat the best, I suppose.
October 28th at Fort Wayne against St. Francis. November 4th at home versus Marian. And November 11th away at Concordia.
Oh, dear Lord.
Woof.
Yeah, the Gauntlet is certainly still here.
It is the real deal. Oh my gosh. and I do love it because at the end of the year, you get to hype up and you have these very high-profile matchups against two teams that who's going to get the nod for the conference championship, who's going to who's going to fall back into an at-large bid spot. There's just so much excitement, but man, I'm glad I'm not a fan of any of these top teams. That would it would just be heart attack city.
100%. It's the Pac-12 effect of teams just beating the crap out of each other. Granted, these teams probably are much more nationally relevant, but still.
So
wow.
we'd call it the SEC instead of the Pac-12 is what you're saying.
No, I won't admit to that. The SEC doesn't eat itself alive quite as much
as it used to. No, you're right. And then we keep going down the road from Fort Wayne to Marion, Indiana, and now we make our last stop here in Indianapolis with the Marian Knights, number 4, a couple spots ahead of Indiana Wesleyan, actually, with the 24th ranked offense and the 3rd ranked defense, and a new / old head coach, Ted Karras Jr. Mark Henninger takes a role in the athletic department. Ted Karras, the original head coach of the Marian Knights, comes back for stint number 2 with the Knights, and he was at St. Francis a couple of years. For me, I cannot imagine having to re-accept a coach, like, just from a fan standpoint. I'm trying to think.
That's got to be strange.
It's kind of like for the Florida State fan in me. That's like Mark Richt being the player at Miami, then your offensive coordinator, then going back to Miami as a head coach, and it's like I don't like you, but I like you, and you did some great stuff, but the fan in me.
At the very least, that's probably only between the coaching staff and the athletic department. I can't imagine it trickles too much onto the players, which is probably the biggest part for that dynamic. And he's obviously been successful before, so it's certainly not the worst move in the world. Just a bit awkward. For a little bit.
Does get a new office though. They've improved the office facilities since he's left. Marion, there again, we go back to investment. And Marion's been a team that has invested over the last decade in their facilities and what they do, and not only on the athletic side, but on the academic side as well with what they do, especially their nursing school. That's kind of been their bedrock, and really doing a lot of things to enhance their standing inside the city of Indianapolis. But moving back onto the field, they got an absolute ton of stuff coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got Zach Bundalo coming back, who's an all-conference quarterback for them. 2,300 yards, 25 touchdowns, 66% completion percentage. It's not too shabby. First team all-conference tight end, Drew Byerly. I feel like in today's game, a good tight end is the key to having an insanely explosive offense. So you get that piece back, which is huge for you. A couple of alignment in Zach Sibilla.
There you go.
Right? Yeah. And Austin Jones, whose name is much easier to say, and also a 700-yard rusher, and Baron Hubler coming back. A lot of key offensive pieces for them returning.
We'll have to see what Coach wants to do with the offense. This has been traditionally a team who takes the steamroller approach to offense, and too bad if you're an opposing defensive lineman. You're going to get rolled over. You're going to hurt afterwards, and you're going to yearn for for an ice tub because they're going to run you over. You've had a player of the year here in the last 3 years at running back, just because of the fact that your O-line has been able to basically pave the way and make those holes. Defense is looking good though as well. You've got guys coming back at all three levels between Dion Pettiford, Jake Paris, Nate Fry, and Jay-Sean Underwood. But you better hope that offensive line is good and is able to open the holes, because you are losing two whale of wide receivers, including an all-time great for Marian and Ben Stevens.
It's a lot of pieces leaving for them. Ben Stevens, obviously, you mentioned Jacob Pressler, who is good for another 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. A key piece of that line is actually leaving in Darren Dillon. You have an all-conference first-team middle linebacker, the rock of that very, very, very good Marian defense that we saw last year, Logan Blake, 74 tackles, leaving, along with Tyler Majors on the interior, a defensive back, and Trevor Adler, and a punter, Taylor Soper.
Now, I will speak up. Normally, we don't talk a lot about punters and kickers, but I have watched Soper in multiple years of playoffs single-handedly keep his team in the game by flipping the field time and time again. He was so good in high-leverage situations and putting his defense in a good spot where a shank could spell disaster for you in the game, and really keeping his team in it. That's honestly, to me, that's a bigger than your average punter to have to replace.
100%.
And they do return most of their offense. They do lose one quarterback that didn't play too much with a last name of Henninger, and I can't imagine why he would want to leave the team after the departure of head coach Mark Henninger. It happens. That's okay. But all your running backs return. A minority of your wide receivers return. So really and truly, you're gonna have to make sure you've got those wide receivers for Bundalo to throw to, or be able to open Mack truck size holes and go to work on the ground.
Totally. Also, can we take a bit of a side note with Marian here?
Yeah.
They have new uniforms, Corey.
They do. And I do, in point of fact, have the helmet up. Let's see if I can make that full screen here. Nope, that's not what I want. Let's see. Let's make that full screen. I don't know if you can see it, but I don't have the best picture of it, but the back of it on the neck is the skyline of the city of Indianapolis. This is going to take me some getting used to. I'm not sure I like it.
Yeah, I just feel like the shield and crest logo, the silver helmet, super iconic, and I really liked it. I will say I don't hate these helmets. I don't hate them. I think they still look pretty decent. But the thought also strikes me of how will these look with the away uniforms?
Yeah.
And I'm not sold on it. And hey, you know what? I can appreciate teams always trying to refresh their look, go with new stuff, uniforms to get people excited. And I think they still did a good job with these. I just feel like the helmets they had before were just so top of the line. It's hard to replace.
I'm gonna, we're always gonna talk about uniforms here. Here's gonna be my biggest gripe, and that's gonna be you have a really huge ability as the Knights to do something really fantastic with that down the helmet stripe over the top. You see it tapers at the front, but it also tapers at the back.
Mm-hmm.
Your Knights, you have swords. Make it a sword. I mean, You've got a battle axe on the back of your helmet. Make it a battle axe for all I care. But to me, being really, really nitpicky about that, I wish they would have done more with that stripe. It feels a little underdone.
And hey, there's something to be said for a team that if the worst part of them that we're talking about is their new helmets, you're in a pretty good spot.
You are. For real though. You are.
So.
It's going to take me some getting used to. But one thing I do appreciate, there were several of these teams. Trying to remember all of them. MARIAN, Concordia, Taylor. There were a couple others, I think. I think there were about 3 or 4 that all had their style and branding guides publicly available. And honestly, yes, absolutely. We talked about when we covered the Mid-South. Having your style and branding guide makes life so much easier. And I want to say thank you to those teams that did it and had high quality images available to pull out of that branding guide. Thank you. It makes life easier, and it makes your team look good.
Totally. Yeah, more branding guides. Need them everywhere. Need them everywhere in the NAIA. We are pleading.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I at least am pleading. I can't speak for Cory, but
I too am pleading, because we utilize these logos in so many places, that it's just it is critical. That and we try to make them look good as we can. But if I'm pulling a 400 by 400 off of Twitter for your team and having to do that because I can't find anything anywhere else, it's not great, Jim. But
it is great, Cory.
Our picks are great.
Yeah, they are.
And I think for my first one, it was hard. The Mid-South was hard. This is hard too. I think with what you've got coming back with a coach that knows the team as well as it does, as he does, I'm going with MARIAN. I went with them last year. I was wrong. Indiana Wesleyan takes it. I think Indiana Wesleyan will take a half step to a step back with that defense, having to put so many fresh faces in, and with with also a new head coach. I think MARIAN comes back and wins this thing. And I struggled calling this a dark horse. But after 2 years of what I'll call underperforming, I think Concordia is set up really nice for a run. And I hate calling Concordia a dark horse because they've been in the playoffs for so long. You miss it for like the last season or two, and random guys on the internet are saying that you're now a dark horse. So don't take that the wrong way. I just really like what Concordia's got coming back. John is going to agree with me on the winner here, but he's going to go a slightly different direction on the dark horse. He's taking the SIENA. That's the other one that had a branding guide, was SIENA Heights. There we go. Just had to see the logo again. SIENA Heights. Thank you, SIENA Heights, for getting a good logo for us. Matt, who you got?
Don't worry, Ann Arbor fans. Cory might hate you, but I certainly don't. I'm going with CUAA to win the conference this year. This is probably the boldest pick I will make in any of these predictions. I don't like to go out on a limb a lot. I'm very much like play it safe in these picks, what makes the most sense. I just think with everything they have, everybody they have returning on their roster is the most complete, pretty much no question marks across the board for them. There's some steadiness there that I think people aren't really ready for. And I think with all the pieces Marian and Indiana Wesleyan are losing. Some new head coaches in the mix. I really like Concordia to rebound, take a step back forward this year, because not too long ago they were in the playoffs, correct?
Oh yeah,
A couple
like
of
they're
years ago.
perennial.
Yeah. I think they get back to that. So that's my bold pick. The dark horse, I also have Siena Heights. I agree with John on that one. Really like what they're doing on defense, and I think their offensive side of the ball returns enough for them to be productive. Certainly more productive than a bottom 10 offense in the country.
Yeah. Now, here's the big question, and always kind of the one that we want to look at. The Mideast always flirts with being able to put 4 teams in. Ever since we've started NAIAFBALL, we've seen the coming of Indiana Wesleyan. We've seen where they flirted with having that fourth squad. For me, I think St. Francis might be a year away from being that 4th team. And I think everyone else outside of St. Francis is at least a year away from being a 4th team. But I think you definitely have to, especially with going to 20. Marian, Indiana Wesleyan, Concordia are probably all going to be nearly shoe-ins for the playoffs this year.
Makes sense.
And now we get to a little bit of math. I did math. So
shout out math.
Shout out to math. Math as my middle school teacher, who was a football fanatic, and that's what happens when your dad was the head coach at the University of Florida. Yes, this Florida State fan growing up had Steve Spurrier's daughter as a math teacher and had no idea how to deal with that. Sweetest lady on this planet too. But put together just some rankings, kind of averaging average SP with standard deviation of your league, of your division, and just ranking those and then putting the numbers together. Obviously, this is not a complete ranking, and these numbers will change at some juncture. And I don't have a slide for it, unfortunately. I'm just going to go through the top 4 in each one, and then we'll go through the top 4 in what I'm going to call my average toughness score. Because I want to honor, having high-end teams with a high SP+. I also want to honor having a tough top to bottom. And who gets that. So at average SP plus so far, at number 4 is the Frontier with an average of 42.667. Number 3 is the Mid-States Mideast, 39.98. Number 2 is the GPAC with 39.91. And number 1 so far is the Mid-South, 33.57. Standard deviation at number 4 is going to be the Mid-South average, or a standard deviation of 25.14. Number 3 is the Heart South with a standard deviation of 24.723. Number 2 is the Frontier with a standard deviation of 24.418. And number 1 is the Heart North with a standard deviation of 23.12. To mention it, the Mideast has a standard deviation 9th out of 9 so far of 29.45. So where does that put us on our average toughness ranking? We have a tie for 4th place, the Heart North and the Heart South at 4.5 average. The GPAC is number 3 with a 4. The Frontier number 2 with a 3, and the Mid-South number 1 with a 2.5. I'm a little surprised that the Mid-States Mideast falls at number 6 there after that tie for 4th.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. I think Madonna kind of weighing down the conference. That sounds really mean to say, just from where they were at an SP Plus standpoint. Not to say that it's not a competitive conference. I just think, you have a couple teams at the bottom that mess things up for you. But I still think this is a super competitive conference. Very much the entire mid-states is just unreal. If you mashed them together into one thing, they would far and away be the best conference in the country. But yeah.
So we'll keep this up and keep doing the math, and like I said, this is going to change as we go through the rest of them, and as we put in new SP pluses and new standard deviations in there to average out. We'll keep reporting on that, but it's always and look, I have a very simple way of settling that argument. Is it the best way of settling that argument? Probably not, but. But
numbers go a long way.
Numbers go a long way.
Something to be said for raw stats.
But the
data.
But the fact is that maybe I should average the actual raw numbers instead of averaging the ranking. I don't know, because the standard deviations of these teams are very close. Honestly, you've got number 1 at 23 and number 9 at 29. They're all within 10 of each other. Whereas with SP Plus, you've got number 1 at 33 and number 9 at 73. There's a 40-point dispersal there between those. So I don't know exactly how to deal with this information.
Yeah.
But there's some raw data to go fight with. So whatevs. But my favorite part is obviously our patrons, the folks that keep us going, keep us fighting day after day. They are the best. And, we'll start from the bottom here this time. Jason Crawford, Kyle Gregory, Ryan, Hayden Ferrigno, Dylan Gonzalez, Nick Ryan, Nathan Moore, Justin Cobb, Dale Norton, Marty Seabolt, Tim Burrow, Ace Swellen, Julie Lout, Jerry Quickle, Stephen Cutler, Fred Christensen, Nate Soapbeer, Shirley LaBella, Julianne Shager, Jeremy Vobble, Brian Shake, Roger Meyer, Steve Speakman, Bob Boone, Justin Hoffman, Darren, Tyler Pierce, and the OG himself, DSU Come. Next week we have what might be the standard deviation king from top to bottom, and that's going to be the Mid-States Midwest. They may not have the best SP+, but those teams are tightly bunched, and that's going to be fun. I just saw today as we were recording this, we've got 6 weeks until football on August 26th. I am jacked. We are making some moves to make our preseason coverage the best it's ever been. You won't want to miss it, seeing if we can get some overarching looks at the state of the NAIA, at the state of NAIA football and flag football on the whole, and hopefully we'll be able to get some folks from Kansas City to chat with us on that. But keep it locked here. Thank you for your support watching, especially on YouTube. We are able to achieve the monetization level, and then YouTube promptly lowered the levels needed for monetization. Thanks for that. I appreciate that so much. We could have been doing this for 2 more months. But we are now able to make money off of our YouTube content. So thank you for bearing with the ads. The ads are going to allow us to expand our coverage and give us a little bit of float in our budget, and allow us to increase what we're able to do. So thank you so much for doing that. So for Matt Schwartzler, I am Corey Thorpe, and we will see y'all next week. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIAFBALL podcast presented by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to the podcast as well as to our YouTube channel. Leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/NAIAFBALL and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.